All right, guys, so I'm going to formally get started now. This is our webinar on schedules of reinforcement. If you don't know who I am, but I think most of you do because you're here, my name is Jessica Leichtweisz. I'm a BCBA. I have been a BCBA for just over a year and a half, although I've been working in the capacity of what a BCBA would do for a very long time. And so I have a lot of experience in the field, even though I'm kind of new to the world of being a BCBA. When I started actually just so long ago, the BCBA was like only kind of sort of a thing that we all thought and hoped and prayed would go away. And here we are today. They did not go away. And I reluctantly got my BCBA certification 13 years after starting in the field. So I realized how hard it is as an adult to go back to school, to study for this exam, while you're trying to juggle work, life, kids, and all the other fun things that come with being an adult, which is why I really wanted to help everybody pass. I love what I do working with kids. I really do. Like, not many people can say that they would do it all over again, but I would do it all over again. I really know this is my life calling. There's nothing I would prefer to do. And I know many of you guys started your career not doing something you love. And then now you're trying to become a BCBA because you want to live in your passion. So it's my passion to help you live in your passion. So the reason I made this webinar tonight on schedules of reinforcement is I feel like this might be one of the most confused topics out there. I mean, it's just really one that frustrates and confuses a lot of people. Now, it's also one, and I'm not going to mention any names, but it's one that I was not taught correctly. And as a result, in full disclosure, I was not teaching correctly when talking about specifically tandem schedules of reinforcement. And so when I realized that the information I had wasn't good and that I wasn't providing good information, I wanted to clarify it. I wanted to be really, really clear for everybody when they leave here tonight what these three types of schedules are. We're going to talk tonight about the alternative, conjunctive, and the tandem schedule of reinforcement. Again, guys, the tandem schedule of reinforcement is specifically, I think, one of the most confused topics out there because it's this kind of strange and doesn't seem to make any sense, but it will, I promise, by the time you leave. Okay, so let's just go right into this. Again, tonight we're going to talk about alternative, conjunctive, and tandem. These are three of the compound schedules of reinforcement. There's no way I could cover all of them tonight in this video and do them justice in a way that makes you guys understand them, but we will cover these three, all right? Now, before we get started, because I know not all of you guys are here to the end, I do want to let you guys know I do have an intensive coming up this Thursday. So intensives are what I tend to be known for. Was a lot of BCBAs like to give brief overviews of the content of the task list. I tend to like to focus and go into details on things. I'm a very detail-oriented person, just my personality. That's my dog, Lucky. You'll probably hear him at some point tonight. He tends to interrupt everything that I do. We, rather than hating on him, we just embrace him and we love him and accept that he is an ill-behaved monster, but he's my monster and I love him. So we have now, where I have branded this year, all of my intensives around Lucky. They're all going to be about the adventures of Lucky and Jess. They're all going to be based upon true stories. So I have an event coming up this Thursday. It's only $19 to attend. You get 40 questions, all about punishment, reinforcement, extinction, social, automatic, positive, negative. We go through all of it, and I'm going to show you how to break them down. So if you decide to join, you get the 40 questions immediately upon buying the course, which is on my website, hopeeducationservices.com. And then you do the 40 questions, come to the intensive on Thursday. It's recorded, and then you get to keep the recording and the questions until you pass. The way I work with all of my products is you always get to keep the product as long as you're still studying. I do ask as a courtesy because I pay for each course that you just let me know when you finish, so I don't pay for your account when you're not using it. But all right, let's jump right into it. So we have an alternative schedule of reinforcement. This a lot of people confuse because it says you may either fill a ratio or an interval component in order to receive access to a reinforcer. Okay, so that's what it is. That can be a little confusing because I've heard people say, oh, well, you have to either, be able to get 10 basketball shots in a row or run for 10 minutes. That's not actually what it is. Now, what it actually is that you have a interval and you get the reinforcement, right? What is an interval schedule? An interval schedule is when time passes and then the next response is reinforced after that interval. So alternative schedules say you can either fulfill that interval, like either time can pass. Let's just say that you're shooting baskets for 10 minutes, right? Or if you happen to get 100 baskets in before that 10 minutes is up, you can finish faster. That's going to be your alternative schedule of reinforcement. So it's basically you have this interval component where you have to do a specific behavior for a period of time. And then as soon as that time is done, the next behavior you get to stop, right? You get to reinforced. Or there is a caveat that says you don't have to actually fulfill that interval if you can fulfill a ratio first. So it gives you a way, the ratio component in an alternative schedule is actually a way of not having to complete the whole interval. That's really what it means when it talks about it being either or. All right, so let me go in another example here. So it says a mom tells her son that he must read for at least 30 minutes. And then when he finishes the page he is currently reading, he can stop, right? That's the interval. The next behavior is reinforced after an interval's up. So you have to read 30 minutes. And then when you finish that page, right, the behavior being reading a page, then you get to stop. Stopping in this case, social negative reinforcement, right? Natural reinforcement, that would be the reinforcer. But then she says, or he can stop reading sooner if he reads 20 pages before the 30 minutes is up. So do you guys see how that works there? The ratio becomes a way of not having to fulfill the interval. That's what an alternative reinforcer is. Now, sometimes people confuse this with concurrent because they think that it's a choice. An alternative schedule is not a choice. It's not like, oh, you can either do this or you can do this, and one has to be a time and one has to be a ratio. It basically says there's an interval component, but essentially if you're good enough at the behavior that you can do enough of the behaviors fast enough, I won't make you fulfill that whole interval. That's really what an alternative schedule of reinforcement is. Okay, does anyone have any questions about that? We are going to do some questions at the end to make sure you guys understand that. No, good. Everyone gets that? Okay, good. Let's move on. Oh, where did my conjunctive go? Went out of order. Oh, okay, interesting. Where is conjunctive? It disappeared. The good thing I know what it is.
I'm sorry, I do have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So alternative is you have the same response, like you're doing the same thing, different than conjunctive, that it's like either or, like
conjunctive is not either or either. That's why I say this is one of the most confused topics that there is. I actually don't know what my slides are, but because I know you guys are visual, I'm going to write them for you guys right now. I don't know, somehow conjunctive must have got deleted, but conjunctive also is not either or. Conjunctive is actually going to be both. So let me show you what that looks like.
I'm sorry, I meant concurrent, where concurrent has, you do make a behavior choice. Like it's, so alternative is like you have access to the same reinforcer, or it's the same response you need to make for either one.
So alternative is you have typically when you're looking at an alternative schedule, the reinforcement is you can stop the behavior. It's like the termination of task is typically the reinforcer, although that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. But with concurrent scheduled reinforcement, there's two different behaviors that you can choose from. And each one of those behaviors has their own scheduled reinforcement. So that's nothing really like an alternative scheduled reinforcement. Alternative scheduled reinforcement says, you have to do this interval, but I'll give you a way of getting out of the interval. You don't have to do this interval in the event that you can do enough response.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So this is going to be both. Again, guys, I apologize. I don't know. It's all good. I don't know where my slides went. They just disappeared. Sometimes I swear, so if you guys may have realized my website changed recently, it's because my website like just moved itself around and deleted itself. So I don't know, either I have a hacker or my technology is possessed, one of the way or the other. I don't know if Mercury's in retrograde, they say that messes things up, but either way. So this is going to be, you must fulfill both, right? A ratio and an interval component in order to receive access to a reinforcer. Okay, so now we're going to take this exact situation here, and we're going to now modify this to be what it would look like in the event that it is a conjunctive schedule. Okay, and this is, we'll do this together. I swear this was done. I even double checked it to make sure it was ready before here. But here it says, okay, a mom tells her son that he must read for at least 30 minutes. So then we're going to say, and read at least 20 pages. So if the 30 minutes is up, and he has not read 20 pages, he must keep reading until he has read 20 pages. So basically, with an alternative schedule, the ratio serves the function of potentially shortening, right, the interval. Because if you can read 20 pages, you don't have to fulfill the whole interval. But really, in a conjunctive schedule, it actually could potentially serve the purpose of lengthening the interval. It can't decrease it. They have to hit 30 minutes of reading no matter what, but they may potentially have to do more than 30 minutes in the event that they are not doing it fast enough. So
Can you go back to the meaning of conjunctive so I can read it, please?
Yeah, conjunctives is must fulfill both a ratio and an interval component in order to receive access to a reinforcer. So you have to do both. Okay, so if a child is a child who maybe will just stare at the book, right? Let's say a child is like staring at a book and they have no problem staring at the book for 30 minutes, but they're not really reading. Which schedule would you use? Conjunctive, right? Because they don't care. They'll just sit there and look at the book as long as you want. Maybe they're a teenager and teenagers are lazy and they don't really want to do anything. So they're just considering, hey, I'm just gonna sit here. I'll sit here as long as she wants. I'll sit here for 30 minutes. Don't make any difference to me. But right, unless they're reading, they can't stop. So conjunctive is essentially a way to make sure that the child is actually engaging in the behavior you want them to engage in for the specified amount of time. Whereas with an alternative schedule of reinforcement, that provides a child who's super focused, right, who you think is going to be really engaged and on task, with a way of getting out of sitting there. So a child who's fidgety and hyper and who maybe is like unfocused, an alternative schedule is a really good schedule for them because it gives them a way of getting out of sitting there for so long. So you guys see how they have that has that practical application between which ones that you want to actually use. So that's really the practical application for your alternative or your conjunctive. Okay. Now, again, I don't know where my slides went. Okay, here we go. Caution. So I have a caution for you. A lot of people teach you that you should look at keywords, and you should look at keywords when you're taking your exam. Keywords can be extremely, extremely helpful. However, they're not fail-safe. Like, you can't use them all the time. You're going to use keywords to kind of get you thinking potentially in the right way. Or if you're just really confused and you're just like, man, I have no idea, then look at the keywords and use them to make your absolute best guess. Try to use them to put one or two things away. But this is why I'm going to caution you with keywords, because people say all the time, oh, well, and is a keyword for conjunctive and or is a keyword for alternative. Yes, if you've heard that in the chat. Most of you have, right? I think I've even told you that. But that doesn't hold true all of the time. So here's an example of an alternative schedule that uses the word and. So a mom tells her son that he must read for at least 30 minutes. And then, so basically this is the same example, but I just rewrote it to use the word then instead of or. So mom tells her son that he must read for at least 30 minutes. And then when he finishes the page he is currently reading, he can stop. And then instead of putting or, I put and. He can also stop if he reads, right? If he reads 20 pages before the 30 minutes is up. So there we have now the word and is this alternative or conjunctive? It's alternative, right? Because it's really saying you can do either the ratio or the interval, whichever one comes faster. So just wanted to show you guys when we talk about keywords, and that doesn't only hold true in this context. Just be mindful that keywords can potentially lead you to the right answer, but it's not going to be the case that every time you hear it, that it always leads you to the right answer. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? There are basically so many ways to write the same concept out. And they want you guys to start getting used to seeing the concepts and having them explained in a slightly different way and still being able to find the right answer. Because sometimes we really get confused when the language changes a little bit. And it's also why it's important when you guys are, whether it's my course or whether it's any of the other study programs out there, when you're taking your exam, don't think of like, oh, I remember seeing that in the deep dive and put that answer on your test, because it could be one word that makes all the difference. All right, so we're going to talk now about a tandem schedule of reinforcement. A tandem schedule of reinforcement is by far the most confused topic, I think, on the task list. Again, I'm not going to call it any names or say where I learned incorrect information from, but this information, I learned it incorrectly. I was taught it incorrectly. I went back and even verified that I was taught it incorrectly through the study materials, which is why I really, really, really want to shed light on this. All right, and I apologize, I'm losing my voice, guys. I've just been tutoring all day. I love you guys. You're testing soon. It was Martin Luther King Day, so everybody was off. I did like 10 hours of tutoring today. So I've lost my voice before we even started, but give me 1 second. Okay, as you guys are reading this, what is this tandem schedule of reinforcement? A tandem schedule of reinforcement is actually a chain. It's a chain of schedules of reinforcement, not a behavior chain, but it's a chain in schedules of reinforcement. It is actually most commonly associated with the mixed and then also with the conjunctive and alternative, even though most people think it's associated with the behavior chain. Okay, now with the tandem schedule of reinforcement, there is no SD. So some people think that that means, and this is what I was taught, and it is not correct, that there's no order. So if you can do the steps in any order, then it's tandem. And if you have to go in order, it's a chain. Well, a chain schedule of reinforcement means that one SD becomes the completion of one step becomes the SD for the next step, right? That's what it means. And so people say, well, if you can't go in order, isn't that what it means to have no SD? That's actually not true. When you can't go in order, what it just means is there's multiple control, which is that an SD can control potentially more than one response. So if you have steps to complete, and you have to complete multiple steps, regardless of whether you have to do it in order or not, it is still a chain schedule of reinforcement. The difference is, and you don't have to know this level of complexity, is that each SD just has multiple control, meaning that it could potentially control more than one response. So for example, if I'm in the grocery store and I have to get lettuce and eggs and milk, right, getting lettuce would then be an SD for either getting eggs or milk, right? So that's all that means. So what does it actually mean when there's no SD for tandem schedule reinforcement? Well, just like a mixed schedule reinforcement, there is actually an SD, the learner just doesn't know what it is, right? So maybe the teacher, it's just that time of the month for her and she's being grumpy. And maybe like sometimes she's in a good mood and sometimes she's in a bad mood, or maybe she's having marriage problems, right? And so some days in school, she's really, really great to the kids. And some days she just snaps on them instantly. Right? We know that we're adults. Hopefully none of us do that, but it happens sometimes. We're having a bad day and we get frustrated with the kids. And so that would be a mixed schedule reinforcement. There is actually an SD for what's controlling the person's behavior, but we don't know what the learner doesn't know what the SD is. So it's the same thing with a tandem schedule of reinforcement. So a tandem schedule of reinforcement, the reason I put it with alternative and with conjunctive is It also has to do with a ratio and an interval. And essentially, the child has to do, or the learner has to do, an interval schedule and a ratio schedule to get it reinforced, and they have to do them consecutively. So either first they have to do a ratio and then they get a reinforcer, and then first they have to do an interval and then they get a reinforcer. But the learner doesn't ever know when the reinforcement's coming. So the reinforcement's a surprise. That's what it means when there's no SD, meaning they're not aware of what the contingency is. So when there's, for example, the multiple scheduled reinforcement, if let's say the parents are divorced and the father allows one behavior and mom doesn't, the child knows when he's at dad's house, right, reinforcement's coming. When he's at mom's house, reinforcement's not coming. So with the mixed schedule reinforcement, sometimes reinforcement comes and sometimes it doesn't, and the kid has no idea when it's going to come. So with the tandem schedule reinforcement, there is an order of when the person plans to deliver the reinforcement, but the learner doesn't know that. So they don't know, are they supposed to be completing an interval and then they're going to get a reinforcer? Or are they supposed to be completing a ratio and then they're going to get a reinforcer? They have no idea. They have to just do the behavior and then they're randomly reinforced for it from their perspective. But from the perspective of the person providing the reinforcement, there was always a chain, there was always a set order. So let's look at what that actually means, because it probably sounds really confusing, right? It's actually not as confusing as it seems. Using the same example of the book. So mom tells the child to read his book. She plans to first give him a break when he reads 20 pages. She also plans to give him a second break after he finishes that page that he was reading after 30 minutes passes. She does not tell him when he's getting a break. So this is your tandem schedule reinforcement. First, he has to read 20 pages, right? And then he gets a break, but he didn't know that. She just told him read until I say to stop. And she told him to stop after 20 pages. And then she told him read again. Again, didn't tell him when to stop. You can stop when I say to stop. And she made him read 30 minutes. Okay, that's the tandem schedule of reinforcement. So just like alternative and conjunctive, there's both a ratio component and a interval component. And just like the mixed schedule of reinforcement, the person, the learner, they have no idea when reinforcement's coming. Okay. Now, don't ask me how this has any practical application in real life, because I've never used it. I don't see why anybody would use it, but you need to know it for your exam. And so we're going to learn what it is. If anyone's ever used this and they want to put in the chat and tell me like why they think this is important, please feel free to do so. Enlighten me, because I haven't been able to figure it out. But this is what it is. All right. I don't know why anyone would do it, but you do need to understand it. Yeah, so the tandem, I kind of went over that. So the tandem, it's in the shopping list, it's not correct. That is not correct, the tandem with the shopping list. So that is what I was taught. I know that information is circulating around the internet. The shopping list is where I went over that is a behavior chain where each step is still the next step, but there's multiple control. So like each SD can potentially produce more than one response. So again, I use the example of if you're going to get lettuce, eggs, and milk, you get your lettuce, and that becomes an SD for both getting eggs and milk, right? Which is multiple control, when one SD can produce more than one response, but there's still a clear SD. So a shopping list is a behavior chain. A tandem schedule, I was taught that a tandem schedule of reinforcement means you have a chain of behaviors, but you can go in any order at all. That's actually not what it was, okay? So this is your example. This is your tandem schedule reinforcement. And this comes really right from Cooper. I've obviously modified this, but this is like content is directly from Cooper. Not the exact same examples, but kept them close enough to make sure that it's very consistent with what Cooper says. Okay, now I do have some questions we can try together. Mostly the same examples where I just kind of reworded stuff. And so you can see how it can be confusing when things are worded in different ways, even if you understand the topics. But does anyone not understand this based upon what we went over today? Any questions on this? No. Okay, good. All right, so let's go through some mock questions on them. Okay. So I'm going to present this again. I had to add that slide back. So that way it's bigger for those of you who can see it. I don't know again where my slides went. All right. So here it says a gym teacher tells his students that they can stop running after 30 minutes as long as they have also ran at least 3 miles. Which schedule of reinforcement is this? So in the chat, please answer to me privately so we don't have any reactivity. Okay, so we got pretty split here still, okay? This is still pretty split. So we're gonna read this again. A gym teacher tells his students they can stop running after they have that they can stop running after 30 minutes as long as they have also ran at least 3 miles. What does that mean? They have to run for 30 minutes and they also have to run for 30 miles, right? That means that they didn't stop, if they didn't hit 3 miles, they can't stop running at 30 minutes. So see how all I did was when I explained it the first time, I said that, oh, you have to hit the interval. And then if you didn't hit the ratio, you have to keep going. Now I just reversed it. I said, you have to hit the ratio or you have to keep going with all I did is reverse it, right? I reversed the order I set it in, but symmetry, right? It's the same thing. So this is going to be a conjunctive schedule of reinforcement. Does that make sense? Same thing. All I did is kind of reverse the language here, but this is going to be conjunctive because they still have to do both. Okay. Someone's asking a question of like, if you're in a math program and it says you have to complete 10 math programs in 1 minute in order to go on, is that is that one of these schedules of reinforcement? It's not actually one of these schedules of reinforcement. That's just fluency. That would just be a discrete trial where like the trial happened to be or it could be considered potentially a limited hold, but not really. It's just a fluency trial. That's just a fluency lesson. That's probably more of a discrete trial fluency target. But that is not going to be either one of these schedules of reinforcement. Remember, these are compound schedules of reinforcement. So compound schedules of reinforcement means there's more than one thing happening, right? Meaning there's more than one basic schedule of reinforcement. That's different than just putting a time component on something and saying, hey, you have to do this. You have to do a behavior chain by the time in a certain set period of time that becomes a limited hold, right? Behavior chain with a limited hold. Or you could just really work on fluency where like the target behavior is identifying, like I've done this before with tacting for just if you want kids to go faster and increase their processing time. I know we don't use processing time, but whatever. I want them to be able to tact 10 things in a minute. And then that becomes the discrete trial. So you can kind of look at that as either one of those ways, depending on how you're doing it. Okay, let's look at another one here. This is a similar question. I'm using the same example. I'm just using some weird language to change it up so you can see why you have to really, really, really be clear on these topics. So this says a gym teacher tells his students that they can stop running after they run 3 miles. They can also stop running if they get to 30 minutes, even if they don't hit 3 miles. What schedule of reinforcement is this? This is the one where I reversed it. Last time I just changed the language. This time I just reversed the order. Good, you guys are starting to pick up on it. I can't trick you anymore. Good. Okay, everybody got this. Awesome. This is an alternative. You see here how the first time, this is where the first time I explained it, I said, oh, they have to run for 30 minutes, but they can also like stop if they get to the ratio first. This is saying, oh, you have to do this ratio, but essentially like if you do it this long and you haven't hit that ratio, then don't worry about it. That's still alternative, right? But it's the exact same thing, just said backwards. So you want to make sure if you get that question on your exam, you can answer it and identify it no matter which order they put it in or which type of language they use. All right, let's look at the next question here. Here it says, a gym teacher blows his whistle to indicate that his students should run. After they run 3 miles, he gives them a break. After they restart, they run for 30 minutes and he gives them a break again. Which schedule of reinforcement is this? Okay, so give you guys a minute in the chat. Okay, good. So you guys are all getting this. This is going to be a tandem schedule of reinforcement. A lot of you guys got this correct. This is just, there's two, right? There's two ways that they're earning reinforcement. They're happening consecutively, and the learner doesn't know how they're earning the reinforcement. That's what it means when there's no clear SD. Okay, good. The whistle is an SD to start the behavior, but that doesn't mean they know when the reinforcement's coming. So the whistle does have SD control over the behavior, but that doesn't mean that there is a clear SD for like when the reinforcement will be delivered. No, there is no SD in tandem, meaning that the learner does not know the contingency. And there's no clear SD for when the behavior is going to be, the reinforcement is going to be delivered. Okay, that doesn't mean that there's no something in the environment indicating they should start the behavior. Those are two totally different things. So don't confuse that. When it talks about there being an SD, it means the learner knows the contingency versus the learner doesn't know about the contingency. That's what it means when it's talking about the SD for the compound schedules of reinforcement, right? Okay. Yeah, the break terminating the activity is the reinforcement. Usually, like I said, usually for this social negative reinforcement, just termination of the demand is the natural reinforcer. Because in real life, like we don't walk around giving kids cookies for things, right? You just expect them to do it. And really what we should be doing anyways, BCBAs, is fading over the reinforcement to whatever the natural reinforcement in the environment should be. So oftentimes when there's a demand on a child, the reinforcer is not a token or a cookie or whatever it is, right? It's being done. When you're at work, if you have a report to write, right? When you're done with the report, you get to leave work. That's your reinforcer. Or if you have to work 8 hours, when you're done with the 8 hours, you get to leave work. That's your reinforcer. So if you get to leave, if you have to do 8 hours of work, or you can finish sooner if you finish a report, what schedule is it? Someone's got to answer. If you get to leave work after either 8 hours or after you finish a report, you can leave early. Good alternative. Good. All right, let's do a few more of these here. A gym teacher tells the students that they can stop running after, that doesn't make sense, but they must run either 3 miles or 30 minutes, whichever comes sooner. We'll just go with what that says. And my slides are possessed. This is an older version. I must have closed it and it didn't save an update because these were edited and there was other slides. But we'll work with what they have. Good. They either have to run 3 miles or 30 minutes, whichever comes first. That's alternative. Right? It's just another way of saying it. Good. You guys are getting it. Okay, and then this is the last one here. A gym teacher blows his whistle to indicate his students should run. After 30 minutes, he gives them a break. After they restart, they run 3 miles and he gives them a break again. Which schedule reinforcement is this? So this is the same as the other one. The only difference is I was showing you that the order doesn't matter. First, it was the interval. At first, it was the ratio and then the interval. Now it's the interval and then the ratio. It doesn't matter which order. Good. And you guys are getting that, the tandem schedule. Good. I think we skipped one of the conjunctive ones. So I want to show you guys here just one more example of what a conjunctive would be. It's the last one left. So that's our answer. A gym teacher tells his students that they can stop running after they run a minimum of 3 miles and for a minimum of 30 minutes, right? That's the most classic way we see it. But as you guys see, now you can have the same schedule with different language. Okay, does that make sense? All right, perfect. Well, I hope this has been helpful for everyone. Does anyone have any questions again on this, to clarify what these things are, what these schedules are? Does anyone have a better understanding of what they are now than before when they got here?
Yes, thank you.
My pleasure. All right, guys. Well, hopefully I will see some of you guys. I'm glad this makes sense. And again, there was a lot of misinformation on this topic floating out there. So just be careful what resources you use to study. There's some really great resources out there. And then there's some, people do their best and are confused on this topic, right? I was confused on this topic because I learned it incorrectly. And until that was pointed out to me, and I went back and really like dove into Cooper. And honestly, Cooper, in this topic, Cooper is very hard to understand on this topic. So I hope that this is helpful. Share it with your friends. And hopefully I'll see some of you guys on Thursday. If you are struggling at all with your reinforcement and punishment, I would highly recommend you be here. It's one of those things that it seems so easy, right? That if we add something, it's positive. If we take it away, it's negative. If we're increasing a behavior, it's reinforcement. If we're decreasing a behavior, it's punishment. The problem becomes that you can have one scenario and you can ask the question in 12 different ways and get 5 different answers, right? And so you really have to learn how to break it down. Yes, you are going to get the recording of this. It will also be on YouTube. Just sidebar while I'm thinking of that, if you are watching this on YouTube and the event already happened and you want to buy the recording, that's totally fine. All of the recordings are available for sale on my website. So you can always do that as well. But if you want to sign up for this Thursday, it is just on my website, hopeeducationservices.com. There's a big square that says events. If you click on that events, it'll actually bring you to the page where you can sign up for that. Thank you guys for your compliments. I really appreciate it. I do really love helping you guys pass. And I really do wish you all the success in your journey. Let me know whatever I can do to support you. And hopefully I'll see some of you guys on Thursday.